evening, everybody. Welcome to the Tendaji Talks. I'm Donna Ulrich. I'm one of the members of the Neighborhoods Without Borders, and we sponsor these programs. Neighborhoods Without Borders works to break down all of those borders of the unknown in a community across cultures and religions and race and everything else, so that people are not afraid of their neighbors, so that we reduce racism in the community. And so Tendaji Ganges, who these talks are named after, was one of the founding members of this and a very significant contributor to the community. And so we host these in his memory. So this evening we have Artina Sadler and Traci Kim here with us. And last year they came and talked to us about their friendship, their best friends, and what brought them together and how they have helped each other understand the world. And so they're back tonight to talk to us about the value of being allies. I'm not going to interpret their whole speech, but I am going to turn it over to them. They team teach a class, which they'll probably reference in their discussion. And it is the team teaching of that class that they have recognized in their students, that their coverage of cultural issues that has really, they think, helped their students. Their students have recognized the importance of it, and it's been a real significant learning facet for students. So I will turn it over to Artina Sadler and Traci Kim. Take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us today. I know we've had a lot of snow days and a lot of maybe some rest. You can't hear me? The boss lady's telling me to get to the mic. So, can you hear me? Okay. My name is Artina Sadler, and who am I? I teach cultural competence in healthcare at U of M, and Traci and I have been teaching that class for 13 years. Yeah, we're old. And, last year I told a story about how she convinced me to do this for 1 year, and she has expired by 12, so we'll see what happens. So, who are you?
Yeah, I'm Traci Kim. My specialty is actually healthcare. I'm an administrator for an ophthalmology practice here in town, and then team teaching is our part-time gig because you can't just have one, right? You just have to consume your time. I have two sons, one in grad school and one a senior in high school, so I'm definitely busy with my senior at least. And I'm just happy to be back again. Thank you very much for having us, and we hope this is participatory, so tonight just kind of pipe up, ask questions. We hope that you find this valuable, so thank you.
And as always, can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Okay. So as always, Traci always encourages me to say more because I'm always trying to give you as little information about me as I possibly can. So I am the food system navigator and program manager at the Community Foundation. I have 3 sons and a stepdaughter and a grandson and a beautiful granddaughter, so I'm excited about that. And my son is back there, and even though he's here, he beat me to the venue, so what does that say about my kids? But I too am very happy to be here. So we're going to get started, and as Traci said, just if you have any questions, let's just have a conversation. We're in this space together. Let's enjoy. So we're going to talk about transforming the ally and moving the needle. Words matter. They have power. They have power to move people, to change lives, to bestow or deny, to connect or disenfranchise, to heal or hurt, to help or hinder. Words can be co-opted. Words like nigger, slave, retarded. And once those words are co-opted, we tend to become comfortable with them. We become numb to the word, its effect, and history. We don't think about it or challenge it. We simply rest in it and in its use. We believe the word ally has become one of these words. The term ally has been used in racial justice circles since the late 1980s, early 1990s. It was an attempt to create solidarity in the work and reconnect white people to the racial justice struggle. It also served as a reminder of a very basic premise. Racism is a white construction, and white people have the responsibility to end it. In some racial justice circles, the word ally has taken on a negative connotation. Our purpose this evening is to explore the practice of being an ally and deal with some harsh truths related to that practice. We want to push back on the word and the associated behaviors that we believe we have gotten too comfortable with. So first we're going to start with what is an ally? Dictionary.com defines ally as the verb is to associate or connect by some mutual relationship as resemblance or friendship. The noun is a person who associates or cooperates with another, a supporter. Peer.net, BC, defines it as the lifelong practice of unlearning and relearning and building relationships based on trust, consistency, accountability with marginalized individuals or groups. Do we have any thoughts about those? Okay. So before we get really into it, we're going to do a pulse check, okay? So we're going to show you this really quick video, I hope, if it's working. We're going to see if it works.
It's about 7 minutes long, but it's just kind of frame our talk tonight. We
Nope.
did not check the sound though, so
Right.
hopefully that'll work.
Hopefully I can get it to work. All right, Kanai. My thing ain't working. Kanai, my kid, who's going to be in trouble if this don't work.
You have to open it back up into show, and then
Okay.
you have to click on it in.
Yeah.
Open up the show.
Tech support is on the way.
Is it? Come here, Kanai. This is my son. I know he's going to be like, I ain't coming to see you no more.
Okay.
How do I get that to work? See, this is a good thing to have children, right? Or at least young minds who can operate this stuff. Because I usually do okay, but not today, obviously. Good job.
A poem for my white friends. I didn't tell you. I didn't tell you about my real life, the one that haunts me most days. It comes in moments at a time, triggered by a look, an attitude, a sensing of superiority, of blatant ignorance, of good-meaning intention, dripping crap down my face. I didn't tell you about the look they gave me when I opened my door and they saw black me standing there, their mouths agape, their thoughts running loudly through my head. I didn't tell you about being followed in the store and how I obediently kept my hands and my bag in plain sight. I didn't tell you how quickly they look away when I catch them staring at me in the restaurant and the supermarket line. I didn't tell you how the clerk pretended the white woman was standing at the counter before I had and waited on her first. I didn't tell you how I have to take a really deep, long breath every time before I walk into a room full of white people. I didn't tell you that in the meeting, the classroom, and the workshop, when the subject of diversity comes up, they all look at me as if I'm the spokesperson for the whole nation of people of color. And I didn't tell you that when diversity isn't mentioned and needs to be, I'm too often the one who has to point it out. I didn't tell you how many times white people have said to me in one way or another, "You're different," because they felt comfortable with me, and that didn't fit their mold of what they figured a black person was like. I didn't tell you how disappointed that white man was when, after eagerly questioning me, found out that I was not the exotic Nubian that he had fantasized, but just another Negro girl from New Jersey. I didn't tell you about the white woman, a stranger who chose out of all the white people around us to sit next to me and proceed to tell me all about her favorite black performers, her black friends, and how this country needs to take integration to the next level. So I could see how her life is an example of that. I didn't tell you about the anger I stuffed down when that dreadlocked young white boy gave me a high five and called me sister. I didn't tell you about the white woman I passed at twilight in the park, who tensed her body, tightened the grip on her purse, and walked a large, curved detour past me. I didn't tell you that my stomach clenches when I see a police car because it means I may not be safe. I didn't tell you that your world is not mine and that we are virtual worlds apart. I didn't tell you that while you can somehow think of yourself as multi-ethnically expansive because you have a black friend, I, meanwhile, just still stay black. I didn't tell you that while you can walk boldly into any place you choose, I always have to consider where I am, who I'm with, and how I'm going to affect people. I didn't tell you how your liberalism chokes me sometimes as you sit in judgment of someone you don't even know. I didn't tell you that being a good person and being clueless can come in the same package. I didn't tell you about the comment you made that would take a lifetime of explaining how you bought into the system that keeps us all in our place. I didn't tell you about my day because I had been taught not to. And you've been taught not to even consider it. I didn't tell you about my day because then I would have to live it all over again. And I have to save that for tomorrow.
I'm assuming this is touchscreen, right? Okay, so what do you think? Anybody here? Have you all heard that stuff before?
Some of it I have,
Some of it you have?
yes, but not all at once,
Okay,
in bits and pieces through the years.
okay.
It's much more, I must say, sobering to
You
hear
hear
it
it all at once.
all at once.
Anybody else? Anything? Anybody hear anything new they hadn't heard before? No? Well, that's good. That's gonna make the rest of the day easy, right? So, if you haven't heard these things before from people who are close to you, whom you identify as ally to and for, then you should be asking the question, why? Okay? So I want you to think about that.
Yeah, when I saw this video, it's such a powerful video. And if you're white, you might be asking yourself, why haven't I heard some of these things before? Hopefully, through the course of this evening, we're going to help you process that as well. But before I begin talking about my perspectives tonight, I just want to start by saying that while this talk is about racial allyship, I'm not going to talk about myself by claiming that label as ally. I believe that that's only something that people of color may see or not see in me. Instead, I'm just willing to talk about the path of becoming an investor in racial justice and racial equity. What I do know for certain is how we respond to racial injustice is a choice. Plain and simple, it's a choice. I'm not an innocent bystander in the world. I make choices every day to pay attention, to ignore, to dig deeper, to remain superficial, to become self-preserving, or to take risks. The path in fighting racism is not straight, and a lot of times it can just be seen in hindsight. There's many times where we've done something or taken action and we're like, I don't even know if this had any impact, and then later on in hindsight you can actually process it and deal with it and know what the impacts were. For instance, when confronted with injustice, I might have some sort of initial response that might be more emotional. Maybe I feel some sort of guilt, shame, anger, helplessness. But it's in these moments that I know I need to just calm myself down. I need to pause and listen. I need to listen to the various voices in the situation, and then think about what the situation requires of me. My first charge is to understand the other's point of view. I need to let other people help me connect the dots where I might not have seen those connections on my own. And Artina and I have spent lots of time talking about connecting those dots, and she's helped me a lot with some of the gaps in my knowledge and understanding as well. In doing so, these important perspectives will help me build a certainty of conviction that will be my foundation for action. And that foundation is crucial because, as I've experienced, there is rarely certainty in the method for racial justice. Not everybody agrees on how to do this work, so I need to have a certainty of my conviction. And none of us have control over our inherited history, and it doesn't do anyone any good for me to sit around feeling guilty about it. In fact, allyship isn't even about me or my feelings, but what it is I have 100% control over what I do today, how I act, how I interpret things. And I know I need to help fix things because the way our society is not natural. The disparities and the inequities didn't occur naturally. We created them, they were built, it was purposeful, and that means we must purposefully break them down and rebuild them in an equitable way. But sometimes as white people, even if we want to do the work, we don't necessarily know how to start or where to start. And that's why allyship really requires some risk and faith. Knowing that if I misstep, I can allow myself to be corrected. And then through this process, I need to find my own authentic voice. After all, people of color do not need another white puppet. And if we were just to simply mimic people of color, in fact, this would result in white people speaking for people of color, over people of color, and in front of people of color. And there's inherent conflict in racial justice work. If you've done this work, you know it's conflict-ridden. As humans, we're naturally oriented towards self-preservation, and most white people in general would like to avoid conflict. At least those are the white people that I grew up with and that I know. Conflict goes against our natural inclinations. Can I walk toward conflict knowing with confidence that doing and being the right thing at the right time is critical to my investment in racial justice? Part of what makes being an ally so hard for white people is that we discover this work well into adulthood, when our careers are firmly on track, when we're managers or climbing the corporate ladder, or when seeking recognition and promotion within our career. But if we're honest with ourselves, much of our adult life is spent trying to advance ourselves, our income, our status, and our accomplishments. And then somewhere along the way, we have this realization, and all of a sudden we come to know about the other, and we might start to engage. And it's then that we're confronted with the topic of allyship. But allyship derails our self-perspective and can even interfere with our personal goals. How do we continue to advocate for ourselves, our careers, our lives, our families, and for people of color? It requires a different mindset. Instead of leading, following, instead of speaking, listening, and instead of seeking the spotlight, turning that spotlight on another. Do you want to?
So what I want to make sure we catch from this particular part of the talk is how you come to the work is important. What brought you to the work is extraordinarily important, right? So a lot of times I talk to people, like I've talked to a lot of folks who do racial justice work, and they come to it later in life, right? So they come to it after, the kids are gone, they may or may not be married, or they may have had some life event, like they have, all of a sudden they have a black child, or they have a black grandchild, or their daughter or son marries a person of color, and they see the things that are happening to them. I've known white people to adopt or to have foster children and never realize why their friends begin to avoid them. And that moves them, right? But for me as a person of color, I'm always looking at that like, okay, why didn't it matter before then, right? That causes a little bit of that suspicion and some of that angst among people of color and white people, because if you come to the work because something moves you, then to me it's like, well, how much tragedy has happened before you engaged? How many people have lost their lives before you engage? And it sounds harsh, but when you're coming into this space to do this work, honesty is the best thing, right? And so for me to stand and say, oh, you came to the work at 80 years old, thank you for coming. Because you've lived 80 years. You've raised children. And you haven't prepared them to do this work. Right? So when people are suspect about you, don't take that personally. It's our risk to engage with you. It's our risk to come and say, here, let me open my life to you. Let me show you what's going on. But if I can't trust that you came out of an actual meaningful kind of situation, then it's going to be a problem, right? And a lot of people have that issue. We don't always articulate it, and we don't always say something, but we just kind of watch you. We just kind of lay back in the cut and be like, let's see what happens. And I know some great people who have come to this work that way, right? But when they came to the work, they came all in. And they were willing to learn and willing to grow. So that's one of the things I wanted to make sure we put in that space right there. Make sure you understand when you're walking in that space, everybody's not going to trust you, but that should not be the requirement for doing the work. Because people don't trust me, and I can go outside. I can go over to FIA, and they probably won't trust me in FIA. That don't mean I don't go over there, right? So we have to get past that.
Yeah, and in fact, it can be argued that allyship is more often what white people do when the person of color is not around. What's in my head? What's in my heart? There's a Bible verse that says, the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. In other words, we can't hide our true selves for long. If we say all the right things in front of people of color, but then behind closed doors, we rationalize our behavior and opinions, we realign ourselves with the white status quo, eventually we're going to be exposed as phony, insincere, and actually very damaging to the allyship relationship. I need to ask myself, do I stand in the gap when people of color aren't listening? Do I take action with my staff, with my boss, with my family, friends? Do I provide the perspective needed to help white people wake up to the realities and experiences of people of color? It's interesting because I just found this. This is kind of what allyship sounds like. San Antonio Spurs head coach Greg Popovich explained this week why he thinks it's important that the NBA celebrate Black History Month. And I'm going to quote him here. He said, I think it's pretty obvious, he told reporters. The league is made up of a lot of black guys. To honor that and understand it is pretty simplistic. How would you ignore that? But more importantly, we live in a racist country that hasn't figured it out yet. And it's always important to bring attention to it, even if it angers some people. The point is, you have to keep it in front of everybody's nose so they'll understand it still hasn't been taken care of, and we have a lot of work to do. Now, I heard that, and I was like, to me, that was really encouraging. Rarely do you hear white voices in leadership roles and positions of power speak that frankly. And of course, I love the way he said, you know, it's pretty simplistic. What don't we get about this? This is the kind of country we live in. We got to deal with it. But the important part is that we keep this in front of everybody's faces constantly, and we're talking about it and dealing with it. So to me, that was encouraging, and it's good to find other people like that so we can, you know, be brave.
So we're going to go back to our, I'm so used to touch screens now, it's ridiculous. Just want to go back to the definitions. And I want to ask you a question. Is this current iteration of allyship working? If you use either of these definitions, is it working?
I believe in some cases.
In some cases it's working?
I do.
Okay.
I just wanted to, state the fact that, if somebody, I know a lot of white
Okay.
people, and I'm friends with a lot of white
Okay.
people, but I would rather a white person, I would accept transparency from the individual based on their racial feelings toward black people. I would accept the transparency, I would accept that based on, how they were maybe, the environment they grew up in, and how hard it is to escape something once you've been brought up a certain way.
So give me an example of that.
Say, if a white person, if I was to be approached by a white person, or say I'm a salesman or something,
Okay.
and then they say, well, I don't like Negroes or whatever the case. I would accept that transparency from that individual,
Okay.
based on them hiding what's inside. Put on the facade, smile, yes, as
Okay.
opposed to that, I would accept that more so than a fake facade about it.
Right.
And then maybe we can work through the issues as we go along. But as far as the hiding it inside and one thing, that's really, but I really never experienced any racism towards me myself. I'm a God-fearing man, and I do believe I have a certain spirit to pick up on vibes, certain, but I don't judge anyone, because everyone has the right to, feel the way they feel. But I would like to say I would accept transparency from someone, a white person, as far as their feelings against me, opposed to hiding up under them and then befriending you, knowing all along inside, So
We're gonna talk more about that.
Oh.
We're gonna talk more about that.
Oh.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I was going to say, in small groups, I think that form, I think we can begin and work on the peer net definition.
Okay.
But I don't think our nation is doing it or has done it, and I certainly don't think our leadership is advocating it today. So I don't think we're a good example at all for the world, and I think, I'm not sure if Traci had said it or you, but one of you said something that made me think, we're a country that across the globe, we take credit for being the free, equal country. We take credit for that, and yet we don't offer it at all. And it's true. It's huge. It's just really hard right here.
So I'm directing you to these definitions because I want to push back on both of these, and I want to do it with data. Okay? So, according to the film Unnatural Causes, and you all seen Unnatural Causes? I'm so used to everybody having seen that movie, I'm sorry. I'm sure they have it here, but it came on PBS. It came out a few years ago. But it says 70% of Americans think that racism is a thing of the past. 38% of whites versus 8% of black people felt the country had made changes necessary to give black people equal rights with white people. This is in 2016. Only 36% of white people believe that racial discrimination is a major reason black people have a hard time. Again, 2016. 41% of white people believe too much attention is paid to race. 66% of all adults surveyed believe that personally mediated racism rather than institutional racism is the biggest problem. So what I do to you is more significant than what the system does to both of us. Okay? 43% of white people believe that black people are treated fairly in their workplace and in the recruitment process and hiring process. And 37% believe that there is fairness for promotions and advancement. See, even you're looking at that like, nope. 62%, this was very telling for me because I have a kid that works in this, I have a son that works in this area. So 62% of black people in STEM careers, right? So we're talking engineers and all that good stuff, right? Have experienced discrimination at work. And 40% say their race has made it harder for them to be successful in their jobs. That is 2018. This happened in January, so 17, because this was done in January, right? So my kid, my son, who has worked hard and who has got his degree and got him a job, he's an applications engineer, and they call him into the office because he doesn't look interested. And they refused to give him work to do and then said, "You're not busy." And so when he says to them, "Well, I'm only busy if you give me work," then they just look at him like something wrong with him. This is what he's doing right now. This happened to him a couple weeks ago. Okay? 62% of white people believe that their race has not been an advantage to them. Y'all looking all like, wow. These stats should really give us pause, right? They should give us pause because this goes on and on and on. I can pull out data I actually did pull the data, the race relations from 1990 to 2017. And we are only a few measures away from where we were during the LA riots. What does that say? What is that saying to us? What is that telling us? It's telling us that our talk is not lining up with our walk, right? Somebody's asleep at the wheel. We're not doing the things we say we're doing. And that's a problem. So our current idea of allyship is not yielding much fruit. Either we have too many allies and not enough movement, or something is going on, right? So in light of that fact, we are offering up a different definition of allyship, of ally. So what we see, Tracy and I see an ally as a person who recognizes their privilege and how it functions in all environments, especially their own personal environment. How does it operate in your house? How does it operate outside your door? How does it operate on your job? How does it operate? You have to see it, you have to understand how it functions, and you have to be willing to intervene. The person understands the history of oppression and the current manifestations. It's not enough to know that we had slaves once. It's not enough. How does that translate today? Because those principles are still working. And we're not interrupting because they're going unchecked. Okay? Watch that. A true ally is in a constant state of learning and relearning. There's nothing worse than an uninformed ally. They actively pursue justice and equity, not equality, equity in all environments. They make all people operating in their privilege uncomfortable. So when I walk in a room and I'm walking in my Artina privilege, then that means that Tracy has an obligation to call me out on it, Bob has an obligation, Nancy has an obligation, Lynn, everybody has an obligation. Because we all walk in privilege somewhere. And it may not happen in that space at that time, but that needs to be addressed. We have this, we were laughing about this earlier because we do this when we grade papers. So we grade papers separately, and then we come together to give the final grade, right? And sometimes we have to battle. We have to battle. Because sometimes I'm like, well, but they're working in it. No, they did this. No, but this person sold it. Oh, no, I'm not giving you that. We seriously battle over our students' grades, okay? And they always get the benefit of it. But we do this all the time. But we always check each other. Why are you giving them that grade? Because they're cute? Because they're nice? Because sometimes we come in class and we see people, we be like, how did they get in here? Right? I am so serious. We had a student, and we kept thinking, oh my God, he's gonna shoot this place up, because he just looked like somebody who would do that. And come to find out, he had a really rough quarter, and we felt so bad for him, right? We felt so bad for him, and I just was like, I'm sorry. He said, I didn't connect with you. I mean, he explained it, but we were like looking at him like, oh my God, how did he get in here? And then we have some you look at, you say, oh, that person is so cute. They're so nice, and they're the worst students. They're just the worst. They're the worst. So, but we have to check each other in that way. So, recognizes their personal responsibility to eradicate racism from society and from their personal lives. Everybody has something they can do. Racism shows up everywhere. It's not just in the library. It's in your house. It's with your children. It's with your grandchildren. It's in your garage. It's somewhere. It's always around. It never goes away. And then they recognize that their liberty in life is inextricably linked to the condition of the people who are oppressed. If you don't believe that me being oppressed oppresses you, you're not going to be a good ally. If you don't believe that if one person is enslaved, nobody is free, you are not going to be an ally. We have to stop messing around, because the cost of us not doing anything is death. It is our death. It's death of people who look like me. It's death of people like my children. It is people who look like you. It is you. Because you're dying early too. Because you cannot oppress me without being oppressed yourself. So you are dying early too. Why can't we all live? Why can't we all live well? We're not living well because we're not fighting the fight. We're saying we're fighting it, and we're sticking our toe in it. That's what I said earlier today about something else. We're sticking our toe in it, but we're not engaged. We're not invested in the fight. Because when you're invested, you have something to lose. And until you're willing to lose something, you're not going to be willing to gain anything. So, we have to remember to invest and think about this. This investment will require a new strategy from each of us, one that is focused and systemic. We have got to start looking at things more broadly, seeing the connections that are there and addressing them. How do we do it? We do it together. But we're going to tell you a little bit more about that in a minute.
Okay, I don't know how to follow that one. That was good. I'm going to share a few lessons I've learned doing this work, though. Okay? So, one of the things that you don't realize when you first start is that this is not a sprint. This is not something that you decide to join a committee for 6 weeks and then call it a day. You felt good about the work you did. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know what this was going to mean, but I know that my actions have to stand the test of time. In fact, this is what Artina would say to me many years ago when we first met. Her favorite phrase was, "We'll see. We'll see." She would walk around saying, "We'll see." And I thought, what does that mean? And she said, well, meaning only time will tell if I was to be a true ally. Though I didn't really understand it, because I thought to myself, well, of course I'm going to be around for the long run. But then again, that's extremely naive when you're just starting this work. You have no idea what it means to be in the work for the long run. And how dare I think I would be invincible for racial justice when I hadn't even really proved myself with the test of trials, okay? So that's just one thing I had to wrap my head around. Another lesson is that actions count, not merely words, and that may sound extremely trite, but I want you to think about that. So how often are we actually acting, doing, causing change? So it's easy to read books, it's easy to attend seminars, maybe we even go through some training sessions, but think about it, none of those are really actions. They're all things that I receive in the form of knowledge and understanding, but I actually have to do something if I'm going to be an ally. I have to speak up, I have to teach, I have to use my resources, my time and my talents to fight for racial equity if I'm to be a true ally. Okay, so there's a real difference between studying and learning and having in-depth conversations and then actually taking action. Then another lesson I learned when I first started doing this work years ago is that, and this sounds funny, but my life would just never be the same. I know, she laughs at that one. This was actually a bit difficult to come to grips with because it involved losing my innocence. I don't know how many of you were raised in an environment like I was in white suburbia, okay, but innocence is those rose-colored glasses that we see life through. It's the fairy tale and everything that comes with it. It's very self-focused. But then I came to realize that innocence really belongs to the immature, and I needed to come to grips with that. So, believe it or not, that's a hard lesson to learn for a lot of white people who transition into this work. So, if I want to be a true ally, I should want Artina to be as comfortable as I am in life. And until she can be, then I should be willing to be as uncomfortable as she is. She doesn't have the luxury of the rose-colored glasses, so why should I? That's important because everything she just set up here, we could give you thousands of statistics of inequity and disparities, things that impact people's lives every day, life and death situations. All I'm being asked to do is be a little bit uncomfortable. Standing up here speaking to you, for instance, this is not comfortable, but I've learned to say yes. I've learned to say yes to the work and just take a step out of faith. I also love there's an activist named Laura Lemoon, and she says, and I quote, "An ally should be personally gaining nothing through their activism. In fact, if you're an ally, you should be losing things through your activism. Losing space, voice, recognition, validation, identity, and ego." So if you consider yourself an ally, just ask yourself, what are you gaining in this fight, and what are you losing?
So hopefully by now we've established that what we are currently doing is not working. Again, we need to embrace the new definition of allyship and invest ourselves fully in the work. If you're waiting for an invitation, here it is. Get on the field, get in the war. Let's change the futures for our children, grandchildren, and ourselves. There can be no more sobering journey than the one centered on racial justice. Because you're constantly learning. You're learning about yourself. You're learning about other people. You're learning the true history of our nation. You're questioning everything. You're wondering where this stuff comes from. But the only way it ends is if we end it. And we only can start ending it in our own spaces. We start in our spaces and we keep growing out. We connect with people. We connect with other folks who want to do some strategy and really want to make some change, and we begin to start moving in that direction. It is not easy. But living this life is not easy either. And I remember I told somebody at a university, not mine, at a university, they were all like crying and all upset and stuff like that. And I looked at her, I said, "Why are you crying? I'm dying. Your tears don't move me. I don't want your tears. I want your hands. I want your heart. I want your head. I want you to be as engaged in this fight as I have to be. And I want you to fight for my children like I would have to fight for yours." Does that make sense? We're asking a lot, but we still have more to offer.
So in trying to understand how to do the work of racial justice, I would ask myself questions. Okay, so I'm starting this out. So should allies always agree? If I'm a good ally, should I always defer to people of color? But that became difficult because then I started to see that people of color all had different opinions on how to do the work too, and had different types of voices, and it got a little bit confusing. So the answer I've come to understand is that no, allies don't always have to agree, and it's actually not about deference, it's about understanding. And it's about finding my voice again, like I mentioned. Since the work will never be a comfort zone, it's important that I can confidently speak up and act. So I like what, there's a Nigerian writer, Lovia J, says, and she says that just because she's black doesn't mean she's comfortable with social activism. So here I am thinking about my discomfort, but doesn't mean just because she's black, she's comfortable with it. In fact, she asked, why do people of color have to be the spokespeople for all things diversity, just like you saw in the video? So to help herself be bold and speak up, she always asks herself 3 questions. 1, do I mean it? 2, can I defend it? And 3, did I say it with love? And if she can say yes to all 3, then she lets the chips fall where they may. Now, her wisdom really gives me confidence because I've actually started asking myself these 3 questions as well. And that question number 2 is actually where we need people of color, okay? The question was, can I defend it? This is where I kind of started seeing Artina as my ally. I had read a lot, I had gone through some workshops and things like that, but I still needed more. And whether or not she thought of herself as an ally to me, it really didn't matter. I just knew I could go to her with questions that I had as long as I honored her answers and engaged in thoughtful discussions. And by thoughtful discussions, I mean conversation that led to greater understanding of her experiences, not me trying to persuade her to accept my interpretation or advice on the subject. We all need a sounding board, and if I'm going to act, of course I need Artina's input and perspectives. And this bond that we have is formed over years with both of us. We come back to the table time and time again, and we're there for each other whenever it's needed. If we're going to speak up for racial justice, we have to be able to defend our opinion and the perspective and the history and the current reality of the situation in our country. But this involves doing research. It involves talking with people who are experiencing the injustice, and then finding out, I like this part, finding out what our opponents might say so that we're ready. I mean, I used to bring things to Artina. I'd be like, okay, here's this voice who's saying this about this topic. How would I rebut this? What would be the counter argument to it? Because that person saying that had been me, and I didn't really understand the dynamics. And so we would go back and forth, and that was incredibly invaluable.
Can I ask something? So one of the things you can do, okay, so people of color, let me tell you one thing for sure that you should be able to do for your ally. You should be able to make them watch Fox News. Because it used to give me ulcers. I used to have stomach, I used to try to watch it so I can get the other perspective, and I would just be physically sick. And I would say, I can't, Tracy, you have to watch this. And she'll say, well, I gotta watch it. Well, you used to watch it again, it'll be okay. But then she mad at me, but that's okay, she still get the information. So that's a way that we can share some pain. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it's about honoring the position of ally. You know, we don't want to walk in unprepared and potentially do more damage than if we had never been in that space. In fact, I agree. One of the worst things white people can do is enter into this work casually, because that's not how we affect real change, and it's not how we honor experiences of people of color. So if you're going to be casual or unprepared, it's probably best that you get your stuff together and then, come back to the table when you're ready. And it takes work. It's work to do this. We can't just think we fall into it. Some of the things that keep me going, I have, different images that disturb me, things that motivate me. Some of the things that really bother me is when I see, I'll use Grand Blanc High School because that's where, my son is. When I see AP classrooms that maybe have 1, maybe 2 African American or Latino students in them, classrooms full of white students. I see matriculation rates for African American students at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. I see them stagnant or even decreasing. Certainly not representative of the population of this country. I even saw a show this week on PBS called Black Ballerina. I don't know if you saw it. It was a really stark reminder that even when pursuing a creative passion, ballerinas of color are left behind. In fact, something one of them said, she said that if she notices that there's already one black ballerina in a dance company, she won't even bother trying out for it because they're not going to hire her. So these are people's hopes and dreams and potential being stifled before they can even have a chance to blossom. I would never want my children to be held back like that, or to have somebody shut the door in their face before they could even ask the question or even see what their potential could be. So where are the white allies in education? Where are the white allies in ballet? I mean, how is real change going to happen without us to be there and fight the fight? So that's really important to me.
And Tracy talked about needing help from people of color. But, and everybody in racial justice circles, they have an opinion on that, right? People think, people of color shouldn't teach white people. It's their job to learn, it's their job to fight for racial justice. They started, they should end it, all that good stuff. But I can't agree with that. And I don't agree with that because you can read and you can watch videos and you can, do all the research you could possibly come up with. But what you will not get is context. That's where we come in. Because we can show you the connections you may not be able to see or glean from the paper. We can actually show you how these things impact us every day. You won't get that from a book, right? And I've read some doozies, right? I've read some great books, but you're not going to get it from that. You need to be in the trenches with people who are experiencing it so you can experience it as well, or you can have at least some semblance of an experience. You need, white people can, the context we give is the connection between what was, which is the history, and what is currently, which is the present. In most cases, white people are so far removed from the daily experience of people of color that they cannot make those connections in ways that will help the cause, right? So what I say is it is not a person of color job to lead white people down the path of racial justice. I shouldn't have to guilt you into going and doing this thing. I shouldn't have to go before you and be like, come on, just go and listen to these people talk and go. I shouldn't have to do that. And I'm not going to do that. However, I do believe that we have a responsibility to travel along the journey with you. So people of color who don't want to engage and who feel like they don't want to do that, then, maybe you should not expect people to be your ally because you're not being a very good one yourself. What we need to do is we need to strive to become apposite allies, okay? And it's APPOSITE, apposite allies to one another. The word apposite means suitable, well-adapted, pertinent, relevant, and apt. That means that we are all learning, growing, maturing, and bearing fruit.
And one of the other big questions that I had, taking off from what she just said, though, is when we decide to act, it's that chicken and the egg question. So which comes first? And by this, do I take action for racial justice and then gain more understanding as I go along, kind of the leap of faith? Or do I try to understand the issues more fully and then take action, hoping that my actions will be more effective if I do it that way? And those are other questions that I wrestled with for quite a while. And again, only because I had someone like Artina to help me out through this process did I come to the realization that it's both. Because the work is messy by nature, but because Artina was there giving me honest feedback, and I'm telling honest, she said it like it was, but I do both. I listen, I learn, I read, I take action, I receive feedback, I make corrections, I try again, I gain experience, I listen, I learn, I read. It's just a cycle, and it's a cycle that never ends. So you can't wait to be too perfect and have all the right answers before you step out and act. But at the same time, if you do have a misstep, you got to be willing to get some feedback so that maybe we don't make those same mistakes in the future. And I'm so blessed to have a partner with Artina. We teach class together. We're speaking right now. We engage in this work together, and that is a huge blessing. But I didn't always have that. The first few years before I met Artina, I still had the desire to take action, but I just didn't know how, and I certainly didn't have a person of color to talk to about this. So just a word of caution when looking for a person of color to talk to. If you don't have somebody like that, just realize that it can be harmful to go out and just try to find a person of color to talk to issues of race. First of all, we need to check our motives. Is it because we have some moral impetus, or maybe we need some recognition or gratitude for even having the discussion? Maybe we want to ease our guilt or shame. If any of those are the case, then it's probably best not to seek out a person of color until we've worked through those feelings. But let's say, like in the work arena, let's say I'm a manager and I hire a black employee. It's definitely not appropriate for me to try to talk to that employee about issues of race. That's a huge burden I would be placing on them just for my own curiosity. Nor is it right for me to engage in these conversations with students of color if I'm their white teacher. We've known other classes where students of color have been in, and white teachers can bring up very inappropriate topics with them, and there's a huge power dynamic there. Why would a student of color want to talk to a white teacher about these situations? So I get and I appreciate that there might not be that many places to look for cross-racial allies. So with me and Artina, when we first met, we weren't dependent on each other for anything. We didn't have a professional relationship. We didn't even have the start of a friendship yet. We were just kind of in a community setting, actually with the purpose of ending racism, go figure. But then our conversations kind of blossomed out of that experience, and our friendship did develop over time. So really, it was a good foundation for our allyship that way. Any questions about that process, or what it might look like, or why there might be damage to it if we don't do it the right way?
Well, I think that as I listen to you, what's really important is being in relationship with a diverse bunch of people, not because I want to learn how to be an ally, but because I want to be in your world and you in mine, sort of thing, you know.
And the consistency of being there day in and day out and building the trust. And you can certainly do that if you are in that environment, but it's also keeping our ears open and our hearts open and being willing to digest all the information they're giving us, because, like I said, your innocence is being broken if you start this work. And that is your own tragedy that has to be processed by yourself, away from the person of color you're talking to. So that is kind of an interesting process to navigate as well. But yeah, certainly putting ourselves in that environment is very important. You're never going to find an ally in an all-white all-white environment.
So, and I want to just comment on Judy's comment, because we always tell our students, and I believe this firmly, that the more diverse your life is, the better your life is. Because you get so much from people who are different from you. And I mean different in every possible way, you know, age, size, height, you know, whatever, anything. Just because you just learn so much from being in that kind of relationship with people. And we have so many people who are so scared, right? They live in these very segregated places, and, you know, we have people all the time who come into class and say, well, you know, I never had a class this diverse before. You know, you should have saw when we had like a third of our class were men from Saudi Arabia. You should have saw the people in that class when they was like, because we put them in groups. Oh my God, they would have a fit. But at the end, they all commented on how much they appreciated getting to know people from that culture, because they were open to asking questions. I mean, to answering questions, and they wanted to know. You know, people were curious, and so it ended up being a really, really good thing. So I am encouraging you, if you don't have a diverse group of folks in your life, you need to go find them, because they're there. They're easy to find. Just go outside. You don't have to stay in the house. It's all good. So I'm going to do the challenge. You want to do it outside?
Yeah, because I have one more little thing to add here.
And then you do the challenge.
Okay, absolutely. My last little word of wisdom is that we need to start as soon as possible teaching our children. And if you're at the point where you have grandchildren, or, you know, in a different situation, find youth. I mean, and I'm speaking to white people right now. We need to bring more white youth into this process so that it's not traumatic when they get to adulthood, because there is going to be conflict. I mean, they're gonna feel it. They're gonna feel racial tension. It's just going to make their lives much more difficult. And why should it make other people of color's lives more difficult if you don't teach them? So we know that everything in adulthood is hard. You know, learning foreign language, technology, sports, whatever it is, it's harder to learn everything when you're an adult. So just get them involved. We need to train our children early before they make their major life decisions. I mean, think about it. You know, they're deciding what college to go to, who to marry, what career to have. And having this lens to see the world through can really have an impact on which path they choose. As well as then they can have a huge impact on the world as well.
For the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Think about, this is another one of those pulse checks. So look at your life. If you're doing this work right, it should be coming back to you, right? So you should be hearing it from the people you're closest to. People will not send you like racist jokes or say racist jokes around you if they know that you don't tolerate that. But if people are still doing that, or like your Facebook friends or whatever, they're still doing that, then that should be a notice for you. All right? You letting stuff slide. You only gotta let one thing slide and it turns into an avalanche, right? People should be doing that. Your children, if you're teaching your children, my son used to tell me on a regular basis, both of them tell me this all the time, you just ruined my racial identity development. Oh well. Sorry, sorry you're aware, my bad, whatever, you know what I mean? But they know. They say things. I know they know. I know they understand service, because when it's time to do something, they're leading me to go do it, right? So if you're doing the work, you'll get the work back to you. If you're not hearing that, you're not seeing your footprint, you're not seeing your handprint on somebody, you have to ask yourself, what are you putting out there? Okay? That is incredibly important. Make sure you understand that, okay? You're going to get back what you put out there.
Yeah, my son applying for colleges, I was shocked because he went to a scholarship competition, and he knows just from the other students in the room and talking to them, I think he was probably the only one who chose the essay prompt about James Baldwin. And he was able to print it out afterwards, and he even threw Colin Kaepernick in there, and I was like, dude, you are not getting this scholarship. But the essay was brilliant, though, and he ended up getting the maximum scholarship for it. But I was really proud that he, in moments when he wasn't even near me, could write an essay and put his thoughts down like that. And nothing makes me prouder either to know that our kids can go in the world and do this work if they have to. So just to wrap up, it's about 7 o'clock. We like to always leave people with a little challenge, and I have one, and Artina's got one, and then we've got one for both of you. As always, for white people, just think back to the video we just saw and what Artina said in the beginning. If you haven't heard people of color express some of those things to you, just ask yourself, well, why not? And the challenge for us is not just to ask why not, but also to seek out the answers to that. Find out what we need to do to move to a more true investment of each other and a deeper form of relationship so that we can be as effective as we can possibly be.
And for people of color, I'm asking you to reinvest in the work, okay? Reinvest in our white brothers and sisters so that we all can learn together. Hold them accountable. Let them hold you accountable, because it's through that process that we all become better. The other challenge for all of us is teach your children, your grandchildren, any child you have the ability to touch, teach them. The war has not been won. And believe me, this is a war, okay? Raise aware young men and young women. I understand, one of the things that I always tell Traci is that, one of the thing that's important is let your kids understand what privilege is. This is what we do as parents, right? We give our kids everything. And then they think they deserve everything. They ain't done nothing. They ain't earned nothing, ain't got no job, ain't doing no work, don't even want to halfway do the chores you ask them to do. But if you're going to, and I'm not saying don't give your kids and grandkids stuff, because I give my kids and grandkids stuff. But what I'm saying is you make sure they understand where that stuff came from. It's not because you're inherently awesome. It's because I worked hard, I could pay for that, and I gave you this. Other people can't have it, not because they're not as good as you, but because maybe their parent don't have the same kind of job, or they don't have the same kind of privilege, or they don't have to help your children understand privilege. Because I'm telling you, they walk in our classroom, and we have juniors, and they walk in our classroom and expect the A for sitting down.
Really?
I can't wait. Oh my God. I cannot wait to tell them they ain't how I work. I'm serious. People have, and we get mad at millennials. Millennials are this, but guess what? Guess who raised the millennials? We did. We trained them. We taught them what they know. We taught them, if they're not working and they're lazy, we taught them that. They learned that from somewhere in our space. We have to remember that we teach the generation after us. So don't get on them like that. Train them. Train your babies. Let them know, you have to be aware. Don't teach them to hate. Put them in adverse situations so they can interact with other people, so that they don't have that fear of the other, which is one of the things that causes all of this, that keeps this thing going. Well, also, this is so frustrating. So I know we have to fight. I had to teach my kids differently than a lot of people that teach their kids, right? I had to teach my kids where they couldn't go and how careful they had to be, and when you saw the police, you had to do it this way. And I was like, because I wanted my sons to come home. Okay, so I had to teach them that. But I also taught them how to play the game. Because one thing is for certain, as my mother would say, two things for sure. If you teach them how to play the game, they have the option of playing or not. All of our children, if you teach them how it works, they have an option to do the right thing. If you don't teach them, they will never know. and they will suffer forever for it. So be careful. Teach your children. Don't make them think that they're the center of the universe, because I promise you they're not. I promise you they're not. They may be the center of your universe, but your universe ain't that big either, right? So be careful. Teach them how to play the game so they can have the option if they choose to play or not. And okay, so we're actually done. But what I want to say, my last thing is, if you are interested in learning more, developing that strategy, becoming stronger allies, Traci and I are more than willing to help with that process. What I would say to you is get with the Neighbors Without Borders folks, and if they call, we come, okay? So thank you so much for being here. We'll take questions, but thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
You have any questions or comments or anything? Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Have you brought copies of your definition of ally? If not, is there a way we can get that?
There is.
Okay.
There is. So we will make sure you get that. Don't let me forget, Bob. I'll send to you tomorrow.
And a question for you. You mentioned 3 questions asked by the Nigerian author you quoted. I got 2. I didn't get the last one. Could you tell us question number 3 again?
Yep, not a problem. And that's, did I say it with love? So yep.
Oh, thank you.
And I think that one's really important in this work because we shout at each other all the time. And so, and what I like was she said, if I can say yes to all 3, I'm just going to let the chips fall where they may. And that alleviates the stress of wondering, did I do it the right way? At least can I defend it? Did I mean it? And did I say it with love?
Thank you. Thank you both.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk too much, but questions I just have to ask.
Please.
I appreciate both you ladies bringing, training children, Bible course, training children the way they should go. And when they get older, they should depart. But I was looking at the new definition of ally. And in retrospect, I've seen it in a plural sense, definitions, I've seen several areas. But speaking of ally, does the new definition of ally constitute an ally? Because how do you become an ally? By bumping into you in the grocery store or working with you? Does that constitute you being an ally?
No.
Because for the most part, that can be my foe. And I'm just trying to get an understanding of what constitutes, does the new definition constitute an ally? I don't know how you become an ally, because of course I have allies because I've gone to friends of mine who I work with, and I knew absolutely nothing about hunting. And it's very interesting to learn from them that, how much intelligence they have on the prospect of hunting. I'm like, okay, wow, I learned something. I've never go to a person of color and get that information because I just automatically assume they didn't know.
Okay.
So, definition of ally, are those definitions of ally, does that actually constitute an ally? Because, or what constitutes an ally? Because, constitute grocery store.
Okay. So,
Are you an ally? Because
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. I would like to mention the community read. Are you familiar with that?
no.
Okay. It's been meeting for quite a while. It's, we meet in different locations. It's a mixed group of African Americans and other people of color and whites. Judy and I attend those sessions. Right now we're reading a book by Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow. And at the last session on Saturday at the Good Beans Cafe, we heard many of the African American attendees talk about their life experiences. And again, it was that impactful collection of a lot of stories from a lot of different people. That's one way we're forming allyship. So, Bob, do you want to talk about WOW outreach and some of those other things that, I don't attend WOW, but I'm in the community read and I meet at the same time.
So let me say, I love how you frame that because that's how we form it. you become allies as you develop relationships, right? You start, being around each other, doing stuff, exchanging, sharing those very intimate kind of details. The New Jim Crow was a rough book. So you're reading that book and you're sharing that as it relates to you. So now she has new context for the book, right? It's not just, oh, this is what Michelle Alexander wrote. It's like, this is what's happening to Artina, right? It becomes different. It becomes personal. That's one of the first things that has to happen. But then, as a person of color, I have to invest in her learning. I have to continue to share. I have to answer the questions. And, and the questions may be, we may think they're crazy. Well, which one is that? What kind of sense does that make? Because I remember Tracy said, you must think I am just, because I asked you all kind of questions. I said, I'd rather ask you to ask me a question than you to walk around without the answer. Because you have to invest in people if you want them to be the strong ally you want them to be. The definition, and it's one definition, those are just all the tenets of that one definition. What we're proposing is that we have to be more intentional about our allyship. We have to be more direct about our allyship. We have to be more learned about our allyship. We have to always be trying to learn. I have to always read and study and learn. I expect her to do the same thing. She has to do the same thing, right? Because we have to come together in a way that makes sense. You have to see that I'm growing. I'm not going to keep pouring into you and you staying where you were 5 years ago.
In spite of growing up as product of the environment, because people that grow up as product of the environment are kind of, I don't know, I would look at it as stuck, especially in a negative environment, and
But the way
it's kind of hard to, break that glass ceiling to get to an individual.
But you know how people get unstuck?
Huh?
You know how they get unstuck? Relationship. Because when it's not racist against black people, it's racist against Artina. It's not black men are getting attacked by the police, it's Kanai getting attacked by the police. When you can put a name with a face, when you know that that's happening to somebody, it was impacting somebody, it makes a lot of difference. Even the people who have a very sad experience, people who may have grown up in that very conservative kind of environment, it makes a difference, right? That's the most powerful thing that we have is relationship and investment in each other. If we invest in each other and we embrace that definition, because all of us, the one thing you didn't see in there is any kind of division, any kind of group distinction. I didn't say white people, I didn't say black people. That's for everybody. We all have to do this work. Make no mistake, we are not going to get there without each other. It's not going to happen.
Okay, but it's still incumbent on white people
Well,
to
yeah.
take the action-oriented. It's not enough for your buddy to tell you about hunting. To me, that's not allyship. That's just casual conversation between two people. To me, allyship is then taking what I've learned and how I have invested in this and going back to my workplace so that I trained my employees to be culturally competent with patients. They now know how to take care of, a patient who walks in with a hijab from the Middle East. Whatever. I've taken that to the staff. I've trained the doctor. I have trained my children. I have taken it everywhere. My parents, we have some discussions. But, the bottom line is...
But they're very nice to me. They're very nice to me.
It's okay. I love my parents. I do. That's not the point. The point is what have I done with that information? It has to be action-oriented. I can't just take that and go back and just sit in my living room and Netflix all night. I mean, that's not what allyship is.
I keep thinking that it's everything that I do when nobody's watching.
Yeah, a lot of
It's how I live my life. It's what I listen to. It's how I react when I'm in when I don't think anybody's watching. It's how I correct a situation or prod somebody along. It's how I recognize that I have privilege, and it's saying that and then doing something about it. And that's kind of, like I said, it's kind of how I do it when nobody's watching.
Right.
I don't care who's,
And that's the food that sustains us, the book groups and the discussions, and like tonight. This sustains us so we can encourage each other and have more information to go back out into our sphere of influence and do the work.
Yeah, I agree with much of what I've heard. To me, when I think about being an ally or allyship, the first, and probably because I skipped the learning part, the relationship, I just assumed that. the first thing that comes to my mind is interruption. Being an ally to me means interrupting the oppression of whoever is less privileged than I am. And so, for instance, we talk about racial oppression, but let's say, for instance, I happen to be a Christian. And I know that in this community, in this society, Christianity is considered the dominant or majority religion. Well, that might change. I don't know. I haven't looked at the numbers or anything. But still, it's very, and we can see that it is easy to use Christianity or so-called Christianity to oppress people.
Right.
So I am a Christian. I've been a Christian all my life. But I have to be able to walk in the room and interrupt someone that's trying to oppress someone else using Christianity as the banner. Right. So it's that action to me. Ally means action.
Right. And so when we talk about actively pursuing justice and equity in all environments, making all people operating in their privilege uncomfortable, recognizing their personal responsibility to eradicate racism from society and from their personal lives. That's what that looks like, right? I can go into with my Christian privilege and, you know, heterosexual privilege and all that kind of stuff and go in and just start beating up on people because I can, right? No. And if you all see me do that, you should be like, you know better than that, you know what I'm saying? You interrupt that because that's not right. And we get this all the time. This happens in class all the time. We get people who are missionaries and they love God and they're gonna treat everybody the same and I'm like, do you really? Let's see. And we test that theory. Yes, sir.
The whole term ally and things like that is newer to me. I am not familiar with hearing this term as often. But when you spoke about teaching kids, I thought about it. I at one point went to school in Port Huron, and there were probably maybe 5 out of 60 black people, and 5 out of 60 black people in the entire school. Maybe less. We had some drive-ins and stuff like that, but most of them were black. But my point is, like, I ended up getting a roommate, and we had casual talks and stuff like that, and I didn't think much of it, but I just always told him a serious answer. And one day we were walking, and he was like, why do you always iron your clothes and dress like that? We're just going to walk to Hungry Howie's or something, or walk to a restaurant. And I was like, because when that video, it was serious. I've had people, I was in junior high school, and I had a grown man walk into the snow away from me about like 20 feet around. And everybody in my class just looked at him like, where you going? And I looked at him and he just looked at me and just kept walking, avoid eye contact. But I told him that I can't just walk around places and just wear hoodies and things like that. And this was like, not necessarily the height, but this was a very big time where a lot of young African Americans were being shot in the streets and like that. So I didn't really think about it at the time, but he started correcting different behaviors and stuff. It's not like I was like lashing out at him for saying certain things, wherever he kind of fixed it on his own. And it was interesting to watch because I think it was really cool that he was like not adjusting to me, but noticing some things that weren't right. Because he told me up front that he grew up in the UP. He didn't have the most diverse neighborhood, and the one black house that was on the street was what you call stereotypical black person, what most people think of. Loud music playing all hours at night, things like that. And he told me his dad was not very, he didn't care for black people, but by the time his dad met me, his dad loved me. He had no bad comments about me at all. His mom was perfectly fine with me, had no problems, and we still talk. And I don't go to school for here anymore, but I still talk to all the people down there, and I guess we kind of grew together, and I just didn't think about it at the time. So it's kind of interesting to see that degree.
Thanks for sharing that.
Specification to that.
Yeah. Come back to you. See, come back to you. I didn't even know that. I was so panicked. Called me one day, Mom, I'm in Traverse City. I'm in Manistee. I'm in, you where? Who you with? Why are you there? Do you know you black? Do you remember you black? I used to say it all the time.
Yeah, I was
You remember you
thinking-
black, right? You hang around like white people. You remember you black, right? I know, Mom. I know. And I'm tall. And I'm this. And I'm okay. Just as long as you remember, it's okay. Go
When you
ahead.
were saying like teach your kids, I was thinking like some seems to learn different lessons faster than others because I was going around only black person in the car, 5 people, and we're just driving across the state of Michigan into places where one of the first things I saw when I entered the place, I'm so proud of you, President Trump, congratulations, blah, blah, blah. That was the first giant banner across a giant hotel there. I was just like, okay, this is interesting.
And thank God he didn't tell me until he got back.
No,
Because I'd have had a fit.
So,
I'd have had a fit. He didn't tell me, oh yeah, I was such place. Okay, and nothing I can do about it now, right? But yeah, that's, yeah, my kid.
Yes, that's the way kids
Fortunately, he
are. They
had
don't tell you
allies
this.
with him
Huh?
who were going to, hopefully.
I don't know if they were allies, but if he would have came back with him, they would have been something else. I think that.
Allies.
I was like, oh my God, why are you doing that? But anyway, I'm glad he made it. He made it
Yeah,
back. So it's all
knowing where
good.
the enemy is.
Right, I know, really.
Learn what they think and what they say, yeah.
So, any more questions? Well, we'll make sure you get the definitions.
Thank you.
And thank you all for having
Thanks
us.
for
We
coming
appreciate
out.
it.
Thank you.